Hello, everyone. I am Dara Bunjon. Good afternoon. I am the food enthusiast here at J Moore Living. If this is your first time tuning in, I am a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. And we're going to discuss that frustrated baker with our guest today. Let me remind everyone that our shows are up for perpetuity on the J Moore Living Facebook page, jmooreliving.com, and they are available to take on your walks, your runs, and your drives. So go back, dig out some of the shows. There are some great guests that we've had on there. So without further ado, let me bring in Beth A. Lee, who is a content creator, blogger of OMG Yummy, Tasting Jerusalem, and her current cookbook, the Essential Jewish Baking Cookbook, 50 Traditional Recipes for Every Occasion, which came out this month and was just mentioned in Florence Fabricant's column in the New York Times just yesterday. And we wanted to welcome Beth. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Dara. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's a
Well,
great way to start the day.
And it is a great way. I mean, I'm going to just show everybody right now. Here we go. But you've seen it in the promotions. There we go. There's the book. And you can see the babka on there, everybody. But we're going to get back to that babka story in a second. With much of the far-reaching Jewish diaspora represented in your cookbook, contains traditional Jewish recipes you expect, plus some intriguing ones that I never heard of. It's a mix of Ashkenazi, the Sephardic, and the Mizrahi Jewish backgrounds. And the items that we understand and know, challah, rugula, babka, but there are other items like barakas and tishpiti. Am I saying that right?
Tishpishti.
Yay, I got something right. In all your research with these recipes, what were some of the surprises that you came up with? That you went, oh, I didn't know that.
Well, that's a great question. I'm of Ashkenazi background. So I was born and raised originally on the, whoops, there we
Happens
go.
to me all the time.
Originally with on the East Coast. And my family was my mom and dad were both from New York. They're both Eastern European descent before that. So I was raised with all the typical, the rugula and the deli food and the challahs and the babkas. All of those things were typical for me, but I didn't experience growing up a lot of the Sephardic traditions or the Mizrahi traditions. All of that was a learning experience for me. I am in a Facebook group that's all about Sephardic cooking, so I see it. I'm aware of it, but it really, the book really forced me to delve into it. So, for example, something that was really surprising, there are some rolls in there. They're of a Sephardic background called raskis. But when I researched those, and I was so lucky to I have friends originally from college who are of Sephardic background, specifically from Greece, and they were so helpful. The mom, the aunt, there's two cousins, one of the husbands, we were texting back and forth constantly. And these raskis rolls, even within the Sephardic tradition, there were different recipes and different names to the recipes. And there was even a series of recipes in an old cookbook they shared with me where if you took the dough and you like basically baked it again, you could come up with something that they called something else that was then a crispy, more like a cookie kind of thing rather than a roll. And it was so fascinating just to learn and to try to figure out the nuances of it. So I loved making the raskis, and then there's a recipe in there called bizcochos, which is basically sort of the Sephardic version of mandelbrot, if you will, that kind of double baked cookie that you would, like my friend's mom, she's in her early 80s. She says, I always have those in the kitchen. She runs out, she makes more. She always has them for when people come over. So I loved learning that all really, and I'm sure far outside the Jewish diaspora, so many cuisines have that crispy cookie version, something like that. So I loved learning about that. The malawach was really interesting. That's a Yemenite flatbread that you roll up and then flatten, and you just stick it in. It's actually not baked. I have to admit that it's a pan fry. So it's we went a little bit outside the rules of the book. But that was fascinating too, making it, there's no yeast in it. And it's a really interesting recipe, kind of very simple, but it's the technique. And then you end up with this fluffy or flaky flatbread. And you can keep the uncooked ones in the freezer. And when you feel like a piece of flatbread, you grab one from the freezer, stick it in your like cast iron pan or some kind of pan,
Right.
and a couple of minutes you have one. Anyways, those were all learning experiences for me, and I loved that part of doing the book. Loved it.
I have a question here, maybe you can address it or not. It says, I'm not really familiar with these categories or tribes. Is there a distinctive culinary difference that you can quantify between Sephardic, Ashkenazi, and Mizrahi?
That's a great question too. Somebody asked me that once before. So I think the baking in the Sephardic traditions tends to have, like, the doughs tend to be very simple, and oftentimes you use oils. You also see, I think, a lot of fruits in the Sephardic tradition. The Mizrahi background, so that's going to be more Middle Eastern and sometimes Asian influenced. So that the ones I represented in the book, so there's something called malawach, as I mentioned. There's a sort of pancake called lachuch, which is similar to what do you call injera
Okay.
right? So in the
African.
so the Mizrahi background, I think, and there's pita. Pita is I think you can put it in the Mizrahi background. And I've also heard recently that so both of those things, the malawach and the lachuch, are Yemenite breads, but I understand there are also Yemenite Sephardic Jews. So I have to learn more now about that. So I think you're going to feel like maybe you're a little more in the flatbreads of the Middle East in the Mizrahi baking, and with the Sephardic, I think you're going to see more fruits. You're going to see more oils in the doughs. I know there's something else. It'll come to me. But those are some of the things that come to mind that I learned as I worked my way through the book.
As you were saying, you grew up on the East Coast. Your parents were from New York, but you grew up in Massachusetts. Was
Yes.
it college that took you to the West Coast, or was it something else?
No, actually, so I'm the fourth of four kids, and my parents, and my mom specifically, she was one of six kids in her family, and she was sort of became the black sheep of the family when my dad, first they moved to Massachusetts, which was, even from New York, was like something totally different. We were Western Massachusetts in the heart of the Berkshires, very country, kind of country-like, and very beautiful. And then my dad got transferred, and he was transferred out to Sunnyvale, California, Northern California, to run a field office at Lockheed. And when he decided to, my parents decided he was going to take that job, they picked up the family and moved all the way to California, which was kind of unheard of in the rest of the family. And it worked out great for me. I was 11 at the time, and I had a great childhood in Massachusetts, but it was wonderful to be in California. I did have one brother who was a senior in high school, and that was a really tough year for him.
Of
But anyhow,
course.
that's what brought us here. So all of my immediate family is still in California. To me and my oldest brother are Northern California. My parents are still alive and kicking. My dad just turned 94. My mom is going to be 92 in October. And so we're all Northern California. And then I have two brothers in Southern California. And still
Well,
have the whole East Coast family as well. Lots of cousins and such in New York, New Jersey, Florida. As someone said, Florida, Southern New York. I still have a lot of.
yeah, yeah, the tribe is all over Florida, and I think now going up to the Carolinas as well.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
you went to Berkeley. You
I
got a
did.
degree in business administration, marketing, and finance,
Hmm.
and you ended up working for in the companies in Silicon Valley.
I
And I
did.
think in your press release, you says you gave up the chips there to go for real chips.
Yes.
What was that aha moment? What was it that drove you into your blog, which is omgyummy.com? What was that aha moment? What was that
So
explosion that said, I'm going to change?
right. It was a couple of things. I think, as I say in the book in the introduction, I was sort of a little bit of a slow learner. There was always this bubbling love for food and for baking and inquisitiveness about my grandmother's baking. Um, but other than, I had this career, busy Silicon Valley, commuting, all that kind of stuff. And we were in this gourmet club where we met 4 times a year right in our neighborhood. And oh, did I love that. So that gave me a little bit of an outlet, but still it was just something on the side. And then we took our family on a trip to Italy and really realized that the way we travel is we plan our food and we sightsee and learn about the culture in between. So as a family, we had this revelation how important food was to us. And then the Julie and Julia movie came out. And it wasn't really Julie and her blog that was the motivation. It was Julia, because I remembered growing up and watching WGBH and Julia Child on TV. Again, one of those things, I did it all during my childhood, but I didn't know what it meant to me then. And so watching that movie, and I dragged my family there, and they're like, okay. But we loved the movie. We loved, Meryl Streep's depiction of Julia Child. We just absolutely loved the movie. And so I think after both of those things, um, and I was kind of taking a little break in my high tech career because of some family obligations, but I was antsy. And it was actually my son at the time was like, Beth, just, Mom, just write a blog. Start writing about food. You love it. Just start writing about food. And so it was kind of, I don't know that there was one aha moment. There was kind of that. And then, yes, we were literally sitting in the family room one afternoon on like a Sunday afternoon, and my son was really into technology, and he's like, just start writing a blog. Just do it and see what happens. You love it. And I found the name, Oh My God, Yummy. It was available, and I'm a very eclectic cook, so I didn't see myself picking just one type of food to write about. So that seemed like a good name. Then I just decided to go to a blog conference to kind of see what is this all about, and that I was hooked. I mean, I met Dory Greenspan at that conference. I met so many other people I'm still friends with. She was so warm and welcoming to me. And I learned so much. I loved the sessions on photography. I went to a session where I had this big moment of wondering why my grandmother was such a great baker, but none of her 6 kids learned to bake. Everything about it, I just got more and more excited. And I finally realized, that food is my passion. And I've just kept going with it since then, because I just
Well,
decided that was, really going after your passion. Like, you only have so many years, just do it. So
do
that's
it.
what I did.
Yeah. Um, you dedicated, and this is going to come back to things. The book is dedicated, and let me go over the dedication to my dear Bubby, a brilliant baker who never wrote a recipe. May this book bring her baking back to life. Tell us about your Bubby's challah, which I believe it's her recipe in the book, or no, no, no. She didn't have the recipe, and you and your mother watched her put it together. Why don't you fill people in on that?
Sure, sure. So I write about it in the introduction. Again, this was that sort of latent love for food that I must have had. I had some cognitive reality about it, but before we moved to the West Coast, I was like, Mom, we got to go to Grandma's apartment. We got to write down her recipe for challah, because my grandmother my mother still talks about this all the time. My grandmother was an amazing baker. I didn't get to see everything she baked because she was much farther along in life, fairly old when I spent the majority of my time with her, but she still baked challah every single week. She always baked it when we came from Massachusetts to visit. But she didn't have any recipes at all. Everything she just made. And I think that's the way people used to cook to begin with, but also she literally couldn't write. When she came to this country from Poland, she didn't really grow up with, she's very, very smart woman, very intelligent woman, but she didn't have a regular education. So she literally didn't write. She learned to sign her name and do other things that she had to do. So there were no recipes. There wasn't those books that you hope, those pieces of paper you hope are going to be passed down. So my mom and I stood there. There's no digital at this point, right? So we have a pencil, a pen, a piece like the back of an envelope. She's showing us what she does, but the only thing that I could get a measurement for is she bought a 2-pound bag of flour, which is hard to find, but it wasn't, I guess, hard to find that. She used that whole 2 pounds for her recipe, but everything else was measured in a juice glass. Might have even been a yahrzeit glass, the yahrzeit candles that
Right.
Jewish people burn. So, sometimes they would, let all the wax burn out, and we didn't want to waste anything. I seriously think they might have been empty yahrzeit candle glasses, but there's pictures on my, envelope. I drew the glass and I put like a line halfway. But what does that mean? I didn't know the size of the glass. So
Didn't
that
she use eggshells too?
so that was in so that's another good one. That was in my Hamantaschen recipe, the one called Hermine's Hamantaschen. My dear, dear friend, who is someone I consider family, you choose, Sharon. Her mother was an amazing baker. Her name was Hermine. And Sharon not only did amazing testing for me for the book, but she gave me her mother's Hamantaschen recipe. And that was one of the few recipes that no one has really, like, she had it, but she's never really made it. So she gave it to me to work with. And yes, one of the measurements was use enough orange juice as fills half an eggshell. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to fly with my editor. I'm going to have to figure that out more specifically. But I think that's the way people used to bake. They knew what it was supposed to feel like. They knew what
Right.
it was supposed to look like. So honestly, I have this challah recipe, and I had it. It's true. I was afraid to try to make it myself for so long, and it went with me everywhere. It came from Massachusetts to the West Coast to all my moves here. But when I started writing this book, I was like, I'm going to make Bubby's challah. I'm going to make my grandma's challah. I'm going to figure this out. And at least I had the 2 pounds of flour as a starting point. That's what it was like. I mean, and that's why I wrote what I said in the introduction. I don't have all of her other recipes, but I feel
Right.
like this book is filled with the kind of recipes that anyone's grandma might have made. And I had, as I said, people that helped me with the other recipes, especially the Sephardic ones. They were absolutely family recipes that I worked with. And that's what I love about this book. I hope it'll help some people, find those things that they're looking for, that, like me, they don't have written down.
And start their own journal for their own family.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
right.
Exactly.
So let me do this again. All right, let's get it here. The Essential Jewish Baking Cookbook. Now we're going to zoom in. Now that's a chocolate babka, everybody. All right, so cover photo is the chocolate babka, and one of the other recipes that's in the book are black and white cookies. Now these are iconic scenes from Seinfeld, where they
Yes.
go in to get the babka and they keep selling out. They weren't in line right, whatever. So baking has always been a challenge for me. And I think part of it is the patience you need to bake. And at some point, I asked God, I said, look, can you give me some patience? But I want it right now. The waiting for the butter to come to room temperature, because when I start pulling it out and I want to go and I go, it's not room temperature. The eggs aren't at room temperature. I got to wait 4 hours until this rises, or 2 hours, an hour and a half, whatever it is. So let me see my notes. What was I going to say? So everyone, I made the chocolate babka. Did it look as beautiful as this? This was in the pan before it was baked, I think. Or is it the finished bake?
That's the finished bake, and then there's the unbaked one on the inside.
Well, mine didn't look that pretty.
Looked pretty good to me.
Yeah, I put it up, everyone. I got a lot of response on my Instagram and Facebook on it. And I want to, my waistline thanks you as well, because I ate the whole thing except for one slice that I gave to my neighbor. I added raisins. Let's see.
My niece would thank you for that.
Okay. Whose recipe was the babka? Was it your bubby's?
No, I wish and according to my mom, she made things like babka and rugala, but no, it's really mine. I worked really hard on that recipe. I started with, a friend gave me a recipe that was kind of a compilation of, from a magazine, from another book, and something she'd worked on over the years. But it was a little bit complicated. And in this book, I really wanted it to be approachable for home cooks, for people who are new to baking, people who are experienced, or anything in between. And I really tried to stick to ingredients you can find at your local store. So, like your local big store, not any specialty stores. That was kind of the charter, part of the charter of the book. So I really wanted the babka recipe to be, you can only make babka so easy to make. There's certain, it's a yeasted enriched dough. There is some waiting, there's some rolling and cutting, but I wanted it to look fantastic and be exciting for people, but I wanted to keep it kind of as simple as I could. So I worked originally it was 2 babkas. If you're going to go to the trouble to make the dough, it's going to be 2. There was a reason that, I was trying to make it so the outside of the dough was clean, instead of with those beautiful striations you get from the. And then I finally just went to my editor and I said, you know what? I think we should do 1 babka, because that's going to be less intimidating for people. And I really want to cut it open. That's a little bit harder, but not really. And I don't want to do. I had a streusel on top, which is lovely, but again, it's one more thing. Like then you got to make the filling, you got to make the dough, you got to make the streusel. I was really trying to keep it approachable. So And then, I love adding citrus to doughs. So I read for every recipe that I created myself, I have like a spreadsheet with I look at 7 to 8 other recipes and I look at them all side by side and then think about what I want to do. And so this was really my own recipe. And I had a wonderful tester, my friend Sharon, who I mentioned, the daughter of Hermine, who went through round and round with me to get the filling just right. And there's another recipe in the book called kakosh, which is actually kind of a relative of babka. And I didn't want to use the exact same filling for both of them, but we learned a lot working on the chocolate filling in the kakosh, and had that also helped influenced us. And I was lucky. I had another tester who is a pastry chef. Her name is Jenny Field, and she has a blog, Pastry Chef Online. She also helped me work through the filling and the dough and working with that enriched dough, how long it needs to be in the mixer. So anyways, that was a labor of love. But I felt like what I came out with in the end, well, I mean, you say you're a frustrated baker, but you ended up with a beautiful babka. I can tell you a story. I have a friend that lives in my neighborhood who is really not a baker at all, but she got so excited about me writing the book. She bought the book. She goes, I'm going to bake. Well, she started out with 2 yeasted recipes. She didn't even have yeast in the house. She never baked. She made the pita and she made the babka. And I'm going to move back a little because the sun is blocking me. Here we go. So she made the babka. She made a video that I really want to post. It's so cute. She didn't even have a stand mixer. She used like a hand mixer for the dough. I am not sure she did all the kneading or not, but you know what? She came out with a babka. And she used salted butter instead of unsalted butter because that's what she had. And it still came out. And I'm so excited about that. I'm so glad that you as a frustrated baker came out with something that you loved. And I'm not recommending to people that they use a hand mixer or salted butter, but you know what? She brought me over what was left of the babka to taste. It was good. The texture of the dough was really good. It was almost too salty, but it was okay. And the video is just so funny because she left out part of the babka on the counter and she has a dog. She left the house. She came back. Thank God she'd already wrapped up some for me because the rest of the babka was gone. The dog enjoyed it too.
We're talking about salt. I mean, lately, was it the Washington Post or the New York Times cooking section has come out and said, we're not going to use kosher salt anymore in recipes. We're going to use regular salt or fine sea salt because Diamond kosher salt and Morton's kosher salt each need a different measurement.
Yeah.
They're not the same.
Yep.
Just point of reference, throwing that out to people. Guess what? I use the Mortons, it turns out. I know baking is a science, but I've not had an issue. Looking over here. And just to remind people, I can't say the book is kosher, but it is tagged when something's parve, which means that there's no dairy, there's no meat in it. So definitely go out and you can find links at OMG Yummy. You can find it on Amazon. And I don't know if you can get it soon enough, but you can try for Rosh Hashanah, but at least for Yom Kippur. What was I trying to think of? The blintzes. The blintzes would be good for Yom Kippur. Your blintzes casserole.
Yes. Yeah. There's a blintz casserole in there, and there's Dana's Ultimate Apple Kugel, which is a wonderful recipe you could make ahead and put out on the Break the Fast table. Of course, there's lots of recipes with honey in it. There's the honey cake and the honey sesame candy. And try something different. Try more of a Sephardic background recipe like baklava, which you can also make ahead. It can last in the refrigerator for up to 2 weeks, and that has honey in the syrup. So that's a wonderful recipe to try. Of course, if you like traditional an apple cake, or you like to put coffee cake out, there's a great story behind the poppy seed coffee cake. And then there's breads. There's the challah. There's a no-knead rye bread. So if you want to put breads out on your table, there's a lot of approachable breads.
It's there for many, many different holidays. So two things came in, and I think we already addressed it. So I use sea salt for everything. Is that okay? It's fine.
Yeah. And, I do, if you read the upfront section of the book, I do talk about the salts because there's a difference, but it's not, I think the only time you could have a problem is if you're sensitive to salt. If you use the Morton's salt, like their table salt, you might find it a bit salty because if you use the same amount as the kosher salt, for some people that's too much. But I think, it's easy to do the conversion. If you're sensitive to salt, use a little use a little bit less of the Morton salt because it's going to taste saltier. But yeah, sea salt's great. In fact, my niece by choice, who's a pastry chef, she uses sea salt for everything. The only reason I didn't is I wanted to use something readily available, and you can find Diamond Crystal kosher salt or Morton's kosher salt at the store.
Okay. So I have a couple questions that are not based on the book, just questions that I ask from time to time. If you could go back and give the young Beth Lee advice, what would it be?
Have no fear and follow your passions. And I mean that with general in life, but in cooking. I used to one of the most popular posts on my blog is a pie dough recipe post, but it wasn't about the pie dough recipe. It was about making pie dough and about having fear of dough. I call it doughphobia.
That's cute.
And I really did, when I started my blog, truly like the idea of making even pie dough that doesn't have yeast in it. Yeast often scares people. It shouldn't, but it does. It did me. I just was afraid to handle dough. And I'd say, just don't be afraid. Just do it. Try new ingredients. Try things that you think are not in your wheelhouse, because it's really it's not as hard as it looks. So to the young me, just go for it. Don't be afraid. Follow your passions and try things, because it's not as scary as it seems.
And I wanted to tell people that part of your Facebook page, the OMG Yummy, swings into another program called Tasting Jerusalem. And can you give us a short synopsis on this, and then we'll direct people to go to that?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. So in 2000, and I think it was 13, and maybe it was late 2012, when the Jerusalem Cookbook came out by Oda Lengi and Tamimi, which became just this huge, amazing, I think, shift in people's attention to Middle Eastern cuisines and ingredients. A longtime friend of mine, my first friend I made when I moved to California, her name is Serene Wallace. She and I were watching the announcements for the book, and we wrote to each other and said, "Oh my gosh, we love everything about Middle Eastern cuisine and ingredients. Should we just start a group that starts cooking through this book and learning?" And we decided to take the perspective of learning the ingredients, because oftentimes when people don't want to try something new, it's because they don't understand the ingredient. They don't know where to find the ingredient. So things like sumac and sumac or za'atar were things that people are going to go, "Whoa, what is that? How am I going to get that? Where do I get that?" So we took the focus. Tasting Jerusalem it's a Facebook page, and now we have a very active group with about 3,300 people in it from all over the world. We explored the cookbook, and now just the cuisines and other cookbooks in general through the lens of the ingredients. So we would have an ingredient every month. We'd talk about the recipes it's used in. We'd talk about where to find it, what it tastes like, how to use it. And we've just kept going. People are still just loving and learning about these ingredients. And so that's what Tasting Jerusalem is about. If you want to know what za'atar is, come to the Tasting Jerusalem page or join our group, and or you want to explore one of the Ottolenghi books or Tamimi books. We featured Phalistin, the Palestinian book by Tamimi and Tara Wigley, Sammy Tamimi and Tara Wigley last year, and there's some amazing recipes in there. And there's all this crossover between the various the diaspora of the Jewish cuisines, and so much that happens so much of those ingredients in the Middle East. So I've loved seeing where those intersections are too.
Obviously, we can keep talking. I want to let you know Jenny Fields has made a comment. So some of you, she's on here, and she was the pie dough post person. And Jenny's a friend of mine on Facebook, and
yay.
Yes,
Hi,
and
Jenny.
I know she's friends with a number of the people. A lot of people are the IACP people and International Association of Culinary Professionals, which I was part of for a short period of time. So, next to the last question, what was your epic culinary fail?
Okay, I love that question. And since I watched some of your other episodes, I thought you might ask me that. So I thought about that. And there's one that I take full responsibility of for with my husband. When we were in that gourmet group, the way our group worked, we each did one dish. So one person hosted, came up with the menu, but we all only did one dish so we could really go for it. So, you were kind of expected to show up with it tasting good and being pretty fabulous because you only had to do one. But we had this pear tart to do, and my husband never baked, and I was a reluctant baker at that time. And the pear tart, the tart recipe didn't come with for the dough, didn't come with the recipes that they were given to us. And the recipe for the pears had 3 sticks of butter in it. 3 sticks. But, we were like, okay, we're going to, we're not great bakers yet. We're just going to follow the instructions. Well, it was the most disgusting, soupy mess. And that day, we usually planned ahead and tried to do it like a little bit early enough. So if we had a problem, we could redo it. We were kind of down to the wire. It was disaster. I mean, we couldn't serve it. We couldn't eat it. It was one of those things that just pretty much went in the garbage. So that sticks out in my head. I mean, it was literally epic fail. Like there was nothing. There wasn't one of those, oh, you could do this, you could do that. Gone. And I think and the other one is really my husband's, but it always gets a chuckle. So he always makes the gravy at Thanksgiving. But I have to take responsibility for this as the sous chef. He makes the gravy. I give him the ingredients. We were using brandy as our alcohol in the gravy. And I had something else out, this sweet maple liqueur that my niece-in-law brought from Canada because she's from Canada. And he thought that bottle was the brandy and poured that into the gravy. And we tried everything. There was no way to fix that gravy because that sweet maple against, this turkey stock I worked on for a week and all there, that was pretty epic too.
Okay. And the final question, what didn't I ask you that I should have?
What didn't you ask me that you should have? Let's see. About something like, how about why do you find recipes for things like kalbi, grilled Hawaiian, Korean short ribs on my blog? That's a really interesting part of my eclectic background. So my family, as I said, obviously was raised Jewish, but my husband was not. He's born in the United States, born in California. He's kind of a beach bum, born in San Francisco, but raised in Southern California. But his parents are from Hawaii, and his grandparents were from Korea. So we have a very, in general, we're very, I love cooking everything, but it's along with passing on these Jewish traditions. It's really super important to me to pass on the traditions of my husband's side of the family. So I'm exploring more and more. We were in Hawaii a few years ago, and we're able to find all his family's, aunties and his mom's and grandma's recipes. I took pictures of those. And so I'm working my way through those.
Book number 2.
Yeah, yes. And maybe something combining the two, because along with that, I am in a Jewish food professionals group in Northern California called the Illuminashi. And one of the events was a Jew Asian event. And I created what I called a Jew Mandu. So it was a cross between kreplach and mandu. Mandu is the Korean version of a dumpling. So I like to explore both sides of my family's culinary past, and then try to come up with ways to put them together going forward.
Well, I want to thank you and wish you a happy New Year, Lashana Tova.
Oh, thank you. You too, Dara.
Everybody, the Jewish cookbook. If I could bake something and make it a success, you can. So there's the babka, and wishing you all the best. And I'm just going to close with a couple of notes. So big moi.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I have a funny feeling we could talk for a very long time. But people's attention span, I think we already went past it. So this is for you and me. We're having a good time. You take care.
You too, Dara.
I want to tell everybody who's going to be on the show next week. Next week will be Chef Ashish Alfred. He is the restaurateur of Duck Duck Goose Restaurants, catering partner for the Admiral Fell Inn here in Baltimore. He has an amazing comeback story and now continues to grow his Alfred group. So do mark your calendars to tune in. And if you can't make the show at 12:30, as always, these shows are up for perpetuity on the Facebook page, J Moore Living and jmoore.com. And of course, we love it when you share the show with friends and family. And again, they can find it at the J Moore Living Facebook page and the web page. Should you want to reach me, you can reach me social. My Instagram is at Dara Cooks. My email is food@jmooreliving.com. May your plates always, always remain full. Stay safe, and we will see you next week, hopefully.